Welcome everyone to our first webinar of this year on measuring the impact of regenerative seaweed farming in Madagascar. So I'm Melanie Cueff, the scientific officer of the Global Seaweed Coalition. And on the behalf of the coalition, I'm delighted to share the findings from this recent livelihood study on seaweed farming that has been conducted on the island of Sainte-Marie on the northeast of Madagascar. This study was led by Dr. Virginie Le Masson and funded by Mustardseed Trust and the Global Seaweed Coalition. It examines the socio-economic impact of community-based seaweed farming model developed by Nosy Boraha Seaweed. And the result highlight how seaweed farming can support coastal communities in areas where traditional fishing resources are increasingly scarce. On Sainte-Marie, the study showed that seaweed farming has helped create new livelihoods opportunities, particularly for women, while also reducing environmental pressure on local resources. So it has contributed to new income streams, strengthened community resilience, and even helped reduce social tension linked to economic insecurities. Of course, these positive outcomes comes with challenges, and Virginie will present the benefit and the limitation of this study. Following a presentation, Manon Museux will introduce what has been changed since the study has happened in the farm of Nosy Boraha Seaweed. She is a project coordinator in Sainte-Marie. But first, a few words about the Global Seaweed Coalition. We are a global partnership established to support the safe and sustainable development of the seaweed sectors as it scales up. We do it grounded in science. We achieve our mission through 4 action pillars: funding, advocacy, science, and policy. So we granted a couple of projects around the globe, spread the narrative seaweed in international and local forums. We share science and technology information and best practices. And on policy, we try to influence policy change, especially through the recent launch of the UN Global Seaweed Initiative. So we are a partnership between the French National Research Center, where I'm based with Dr. Philippe Potin, and the United Nations Global Compact. And with the initial grant that we received in 2021, when the coalition was created, we funded more than 32 projects in 27 different countries. We have now secured additional funding to continue our mission, and we are in the process to recruit a fundraising manager to hopefully create a new round of call for proposal. We are hosted at the Foundation CNRS. Now on the scientific pillar, what we do, we gather a scientific council of 15 independent academicians, and I see some of the familiar faces here, that advise our strategy and also help us select relevant projects that we support. We organize workshops and webinars. This is one of the series. Our last one was to understanding the G-Blue credits in Japan and having a status of seaweed in Africa. So they are all available online on the YouTube channel of the coalition. And those webinars and workshops usually lead to projects or to new studies. So there is really outcome behind the scene. On the policy front, we are a founding member of the UN Global Seaweed Initiative that is led by government of Madagascar, France, Indonesia, Chile, and Brazil. And we join forces with UN agencies such as UNCTAD, FAO, UNIDO, IOC and UNESCO, and UNGC that really brings, with everyone's expertise, the mission of the coalition to the next level. And last, the GSC is community-driven, and we are proud to have now a community of more than 2,000 members through our Ubuntu platform that gather smallholders, farmers, multinational businesses, research institutes, and the private sector. So please join if you're not already a member. I'm sure Azedine will share the link in the chat. So throughout the discussion, please feel free to ask your question in the chat. You can stay muted, and we will have a Q&A session after Virginie and Manon present. The presentation will last in total a little bit more than 40 minutes, so it should leave 15 minutes for the Q&A. So with this in mind, I wish you all a very pleasant webinar, some good learnings, I hope. And Virginie, over to you.
Thank you, Manon. Let me make sure this is working. Can you all see my screen? Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, Melanie, not Manon, Melanie, for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to present this study. Before I begin, I have to apologize because I'm recovering from a chest infection, so I will need to pause very often and breathe and drink. It's really nice to see many familiar names along the list of participants. So I'm delighted to be sharing the finding of this study, which was commissioned by Nosy Boraha Seaweed last September. I come from a social science background, and most of my research looks at the social dimension of environmental changes and risks. For this study, the main objectives were to evaluate the social impacts of NBS activities in Sainte-Marie. Secondly, to develop a theory of change, and I will explain what that means. And lastly, to provide recommendations to potentially expand the benefits of the model of NBS to other coastal areas. For this presentation, I will share briefly some elements of context and an overview of the methodology that I've used. I will also select some key findings as I can't cover them all, but the full report is available, I believe, on this chat or via the Global Seaweed Coalition's website. So feel free to reach out to me with any questions for clarification. So by way of background and some key facts about seaweed farming in Madagascar, the annual national production last year amounted to 45,000 tons fresh weight, largely cottony. The dominant models of seaweed farming include off-bottom and long lines farms. This is produced by an estimated number of between 3,000 and 5,000 seaweed farmers, half of whom are women. And the production in Sainte-Marie amounts to almost half of that of Madagascar. So 25,000 tons roughly between three companies, Nosy Boraha Seaweed, Sauvalgue, and Madalgue. Can you still hear me fine? Yes, okay. The main model is off-bottom, and there are 245 registered farmers in Sainte-Marie, the majority of whom work with NBS. So NBS, or Nosy Boraha Seaweed, has a distinct model for a number of reasons. Like Sauvalgue, for instance, it does rely on an environmental permit, which it obtained after a lengthy process of public consultation, conducted environmental and social impact assessments, and it provides the company the authorization to operate on an area of 250 hectares for 10 years, renewable. Where it's different, it relies on a contract with seaweed farmers that defines the roles and the responsibilities of each party. And that's a way to guarantee compliance with the environmental specifications of the environmental permits. The company also provides all the equipment needed for seaweed farming, but it also buys seaweed fresh and then handles the process of seedling. So that was a very quick introduction to NBS. In terms of the methodology, one word of clarification. The terms of reference initially asked for an assessment of the social impact of a regenerative seaweed farming model. So it was largely assumed that NBS is or aims to become a regenerative aquaculture model. And this study is not an assessment of that, it's an assessment of the social impact of this model. Although I do use many elements of regenerative aquaculture as a conceptual framework for this assessment. By social impacts, I mean all impacts within the value chain, from production of seaweed to shipping dried seaweed to processors internationally, but also the impacts beyond the value chain, which are in all areas of sustainable development. So you can imagine that the list is potentially enormous. And so to help me narrow down the scope of indicators to assess, I rely on the social life cycle assessment guidelines from the United Nations Environment Programme. And this is a useful methodology to help first identify groups of stakeholders relevant to this value chain, and for each group to identify the relevant social topics to be mindful of. So that provided me with a healthier list of social topics to assess. And another aspect of the methodology is how to examine causation between Nosy Boraha Seaweed's activities and the potential social impact that could be observed. There are three main approaches to examine causation, and I just want to briefly share them so that you are able to better locate where my methodology sits. The first set of approach include counterfactual approaches, where one estimates what would happen in the absence of a company like NBS, and then compares that estimate with what is being observed with NBS. So that obviously involves using a control group, which in our case was just not feasible. A second set of approach is to rely on multiple causation and to determine what evidence would be consistent with cause and effect relationship, and then to collect data to determine if the evidence matches. The third set of explanation is, first set of approach is to look at possible other explanations for the social impact being observed, and then search for information to see where these explanations could be excluded. So I very much relied on the second type of approach. And for all three approaches, they are most effective if they rely on a theory of change. Lastly, although this is all very jargon heavy, just to clarify that I relied on contribution analysis, which is a way to consider NBS as one contributory cause to social impacts among many others that still need to be accounted for. So the construction of a theory of change essentially is an exercise to identify what are the desired results from an intervention, such as the NBS activities, because those desired results will themselves have consequences in the short term with the help of other external factors, and themselves will have consequences in the longer term, or what could also be called impacts. And so the whole point of this exercise is to identify collectively what is it that the company aims to contribute to, and what are the assumptions behind this, the links in the chain. So that was the first step of the methodology. We co-constructed with Manon and with Seb an initial theory of change back in September. In parallel, I conducted a baseline mapping of the key development issues in Sainte-Marie. Then this helped with the secondary data that I collected from the literature. I built some collection tools, which were largely qualitative in nature. And then I conducted fieldwork in Sainte-Marie last December, where I conducted 25 key informant interviews with workers at NBS, workers in other companies, and representatives from various sectors, from education, health, trade, local authorities, and customary authorities. With the help of Sarah Telou, who helped me translate discussion in Malagasy, I also conducted 9 focus group discussions with workers largely. In total, these were 47 people who participated in those discussions. Lastly, I used contribution analysis to analyze data. So in terms of key findings, let me first start with sharing a broad overview of the key development issues on the island before NBS started its activity in 2021. The population largely relies on marine resources and fishing, but the island faces ecological degradation and a reduction of fish abundance and catch size. The population also largely rely on income diversification with subsistence agriculture, cash crop agriculture, largely vanilla or cloves, fishing, and non-agricultural activities such as charcoal making. But all of these natural resources are exposed to climate change. The population also faces limited formal employment, and the tourism sector is particularly vulnerable to political instability. It also faces a limited access to basic infrastructure and services. And access to land is a central issue for development in an area where people are attached to the commons. The lack of access to key services include lack of waste management and sanitation, and that has an impact on health risks such as malaria. There's a high seasonal nutritional vulnerability, which leads to issues such as child malnutrition and maternal anemia. Sainte-Marie is considered red zone for sexually transmitted disease such as HIV and syphilis. And lastly, in terms of gender inequalities, there's a high gender division of labor where women are confined to the least remunerative activities, which maintains dependence on men. They also face particular gender vulnerabilities to reproductive health and violence, while men dominate all positions of power in the public sphere. So with this context in mind, NBS is hoping to contribute positively to 4 main domains of social development. The first one is hopes to create jobs, not just in seaweed farming. It hopes to contribute positively to food security, to regenerate marine ecosystems, and to support gender equality. These are all longer term impacts, so keep that in mind. And to achieve those impacts, there are a number of outcomes and outputs that it can directly influence in the short term. I'm not going to go in details, but what I want to highlight is that each of those outputs and outcomes have pathways that could lead to another. And it's the assessment of the pathway that constitute the cores of the assessment. The 3 main assumptions behind this initial theory of change is that seaweed farming with NBS is a springboard for helping local workforce to acquire new skills, new training, savings, and that could open up new job opportunities. The second assumption is that seaweed farming is increasingly integrated in the local economic fabric in Sainte-Marie. And so if more people who used to do fishing or charcoal making take on seaweed farming, the assumption is that it has an impact positive on the environment. Lastly, the assumption is that income from seaweed farming will have a positive impact on key social development indicators because it is assumed that the workers will spend their income on those sectors. So the summary of the results out of 13 pathways, a little bit less than half of them show a strong contribution of NBS towards desired outcomes or impacts. So that's pretty good. I'm going to focus on 5 of those pathways in this presentation because a key element of this study was to not only assess what are the social changes, but to assess why NBS has a contribution, which is why also I use the qualitative approach. So going into the first pathway, in terms of NBS contribution to create accessible jobs, particularly for inhabitants of the east coast of Sainte-Marie, the evidence was quite strong and positive. There's evidence of direct job creation, obviously within NBS for former fishermen, but also for other unskilled labor who can work as daily labor on the NBS sites. The result is there's a migration of people living in the main town who commute either every day or who permanently relocate to the East Coast. And that has the effect of creating indirect jobs with house rentals, shopkeepers, restaurants, new transport options, more grocery stores, and so on. One key aspect of jobs created at NBS is that people can maintain the diversification of their income. So people can continue agriculture, for instance, and the company also has this in mind when they organize their planning. But it also means that fishing continues, but mainly for self-consumption. One really interesting unintended consequence of the job creation is a decrease in petty crime. There was overwhelming evidence to suggest that people really appreciate the fact that they no longer suffer from theft at home, theft of food items and things like chickens and vanilla. So this apparently, according to the majority of respondents, completely disappeared. The second pathway concerns NBS contribution to offering stable and regular income. And here again, the contribution was strong and quite positive. But it also depends on the group of stakeholders being assessed. For seaweed farmers with NBS, they saw on average a tripling of their income in just 4 years, with an average monthly income way above the minimum wage. Some farmers might earn less, some farmers might earn a lot more. It all depended on the seasons and the location of their farms, which is also depending on their motivation. One key element of stability was the fact that NBS pays farmers by bank transfer every 15 days. And that overall contributed to farmers benefited from an improved purchasing power and transitioning from a logic of daily survival to the management of very important revenues. It's so different to what people normally earn that there were many accounts from local authorities or customary authorities against the lack of financial planning and savings of people who became rich overnight, essentially. And as a result, there's a high demand from all walks of life in the islands to become a seaweed farmer and access the same level of income. If we compare with farmers in the other companies at Sovalg, for instance, there they can potentially earn more, but they also spend more on inputs. They are also responsible for anticipating the high and lows of harvesting. And they are sometimes held by family members, which makes it really hard to estimate the average income. As a result, there's a greater fluctuation of their income depending on the season, the impact of pests, and the lack of planification. For employees of NBS, the stability of their income was also quite praised, with many accounts of people who started to work as laborers, who then became employed and then gained responsibilities, and so that provided them with stability. They also benefit from social security, with 80% of the health expenses being covered by the company. The picture is quite different for laborers and seedling makers who are paid differently, and their income will suffer from a higher impact of seasonal variation. They also have less saving power because they earn lower income compared to farmers. And as a result, all of those I interviewed who work as laborers or seedling makers hope to become employee or farmers one day. In both cases, there were some positions deemed very difficult or stressful, and some workers considered their income too low in relation to their effort. And some laborers tried to advocate for an increase in the price paid per line, but they said it was difficult because there's always laborers ready to accept low prices given the lack of other economic opportunities. In terms of NBS contribution to food security, here again, there was strong evidence to suggest that thanks to the income that workers receive at NBS, it changes the way they purchase food items. because food is also the priority item of expenditure. And the main change related to the diversification of people's diets. People were able to buy new, mostly imported food products, but also they could change what they buy. For example, they could afford local rice instead of the cheaper imported rice. And also the improvement of infrastructure, such as the road that connects the main city to the East Coast, meant that people can now afford to pay a tuk-tuk driver, for instance, to go in town, buy a lot more quantity of food, which means it's cheaper because they can build some reserve and stock. The potential positive impact on reducing malnutrition, which could only be affirmed if one compares demographic health surveys, must probably be linked also to the early detection of malnutrition that is carried out by health services, including a very well functioning health center in the village where most seaweed farmers live. In terms of NBS contribution to reduce pressure on the environment, the evidence was not that strong. Most of the positive accounts from people suggested a perception that seaweed farming reduces pressure on the environment, because most of the seaweed farmers used to be fishermen or people who used to make charcoal. And therefore, if they stop doing those activities, then it means less pressure on the environment. However, there could be other people taking on their jobs, and there was no studies that could compare the before and after NBS implementation. So it means the actual positive impacts of seaweed farmings for corals population, fish populations, and forests is not verified yet. The decline in fish stocks that precedes NBS due to overfishing actually continues, as well as the degradation of corals, and a local team of scientists located in Sainte-Marie did some recent observations that suggest that this degradation continues, including along the East Coast. In terms of NBS contribution to avoid littering, they support waste collection on its sites, but also organize regular campaigns to clean up villages and beach. And in terms of external actors' perceptions, people from the hotel sectors, for example, were quite happy with the lack of visible impacts of seaweed farmings on the lagoon. You can't really see it much. They also praised the fact that it doesn't generate any plastic pollution. On the contrary, there was a minority of actors who remained concerned about the negative impact of seaweed farming on the lagoon, and particularly on corals. Lastly, in terms of NBS contribution to women's empowerment, NBS employs 67 employees. Almost 40% of them are women. And then on average, they employ 200 laborers per day. And more than the majority are women. Both NBS and SOVALG models support women to do the same work than men, because it provides them with all the equipment necessary to do seaweed farming, especially boats. It provides them with support to do the activities, planning, harvesting, training. And it also allocates space, which depends on people's motivation once and foremost. And that allows access to incomes equal to those of men. It also allows women to earn their income directly without the intermediary of their spouse. And there were some accounts from people that say that achieving the status of seaweed farmer was positive for self-confidence and to gain respect from others. However, there are some strong remaining inequities. First, there is still a concentration of women in the least paid positions, because, for example, all seedling makers are women, and all the people making ropes are women. Women remain traditionally assigned to domestic activities, whether they earn an income or not. And that means women face the double day. And working women have to also manage childcare in order to have time to work, but those costs seem to fall disproportionately on mothers. And for seedling makers, for instance, paying a nannies to take care of their children means they spend almost a quarter of their income on childcare. And lastly, non-salaried workers who do not have access to the same social security as employees are mostly women and have much lower incomes to pay for other health expenditures. So in conclusion, I have tried to put into one slide what is otherwise a very complex set of outcomes and impacts based on the NBS activities. But if I try to summarize in a nutshell, they are very strong contribution of NBS for jobs accessibility and income stability. In fact, not just NBS, but seaweed farming has created economic opportunities that did not exist on the east coast of Sainte-Marie. And these are accessible to fishermen, to low-skilled villagers, and to both men and women. Most of these jobs with NBS offer more stable and regular income compared to local alternatives. The tripling of income for some farmers in just 4 years improves purchasing power, which enables better access to food security and to key services, including schooling. And also it contributes to transform the built environment with more permanent houses. Access to healthcare is improved by the existence of a functional health center, and also thanks to employees' health coverage provided by NBS. However, the supply of care remains limited geographically. In terms of NBS proactive policies for women's job, that allows women access to seaweed farming contracts, equal income, and positions of responsibility. However, it only partially responds to the gender division of labor and the persistent double burden of work performed by women. Lastly, the reduction of environmental pressure is only a potential impact and not verified due to lack of monitoring and comparison studies focused on fisheries and forestry resources to confirm trends. And as a result, it's really hard at the moment to affirm that NBS is a model of regenerative aquaculture. There are other causal factors that have to be mentioned because they play quite a strong role in achieving those outcomes. This health center that I mentioned does a really important job at early detection of malnutrition. There are also foreign investments that regularly have a play into developing the East Coast, particularly infrastructure. There is immigration in general to Sainte-Marie, which could also influence the advantage for more skilled local workforce. And lastly, there's been a local essential planning document finalized by the municipality, which will play a role into trying to tackle the urbanization of the East Coast. There are two outputs that I really wanted to emphasize, and which I go into more details in the report. But these two are what NBS contribute directly that have all kinds of positive impacts. The first one is that it created from the start the Village Association of Seaweed Farmers, AVA in short. And AVA has a pot of funding based on seaweed farmers' contribution from their production. And that means they're able to not only support seaweed farmers' activities, but they also fund any social projects to support demand from local communities. It could be things like donations, funding basic services such as local schools or health centers, or raising awareness for environmental protection. This was often mentioned as a key contributory cause of people's access to material resources. The second important output is the fact that NBS constantly monitors biosecurity risks, the main one being pest infestation, but also the impact of environmental hazards such as cyclones by putting in place preparedness protocols and contingency plans. And the major social impact of this anticipation is that it can mitigate really potential bad consequences threatening operation. There are a number of points of vigilance that I'd like to share with you. The first one is with this influx of people and purchasing power, the built environment is visibly changing. Many seaweed farmers build an additional house next to their traditional house, and it's everywhere, which means there is a sort of anarchic urbanization going on without any supporting infrastructure in terms of sanitation or waste management. There is a persistent inequity of profits between seaweed farmers and, say, other workers like seedling makers, and the difference is quite enormous. There are also inequities of profits between the benefits of the employees and the conditions of laborers. And lastly, between men and women, as I mentioned. In terms of financial management, there's a transition from a logic of daily survival to the management of very large revenues, which, as was mentioned by some respondents, has to be potentially accompanied but with training for how to plan and save, particularly since cyclones is a very strong risk for the operations. And then there was some external negative perception of the company from a very minority of respondents, but still they illustrated an idea that while for NBS it's very clear why they cap the number of seaweed farmers, for instance, because they want to respect the ecological limits of the marine habitats. This was not very clear for other respondents outside of NBS. And so there seemed to be a misunderstanding from people who wanted to become farmers as to why they couldn't. Why could they not access the same level of support? And it emphasized a sentiment of favoritism towards certain people, largely foreigners. And by foreigners, what it means, it's people not coming from Sainte-Marie, and even more than that, people not coming from the east coast of Sainte-Marie. So there's some work to be done in terms of communicating better the criteria for becoming farmers and why there is a limit to that number. And lastly, a big question mark in terms of the conditions of work for certain categories of workers who are potentially exposed to health risks. And for this, as I mentioned to NBS, I just don't know if it's a risk, if there is literature to suggest that people working with drying seaweed could potentially be exposed to toxic fumes. So to finish with recommendations, you will find them all in the reports, but I wanted to share the proposed theory of change based on the results of the assessment. And there are two elements that I want to highlight here. The first one is the importance of this regulatory framework that I mentioned at the beginning. NBS is only able to comply with environmental specifications because it has this authorization to operate and to manage itself the marine space allocated to its activities. So that's a very key element of the model. And the second aspect of this theory of change is that NBS is already contributing very positively to two social impacts: poverty reduction through the creation of many jobs in an area where there was not a lot before, and food security. However, for the two other impacts, there's more work to be done, but these again are for the long term. Last slide. In summary, the NBS model demonstrates that seaweed farming can generate significant and measurable social impacts. And the success factors are based on both what the company provides, but also what the regulatory framework allows. And this is really key because it encourages the company to invest and it also deters any opportunistic players to not come and buy all the seaweeds, which is a major risk for other contexts elsewhere in Madagascar or in other contexts such as Tanzania. Some of the key conditions for success include also a functioning international market for seaweed where demand continues and doesn't fall, some climatic conditions that remain favorable, a local workforce available and motivated, and good coordination with local authorities. In contrast, cyclones are a major risk, and so are the other impacts of climate change. Social tensions related to income inequality could become problematic if they persist. The still on the development of infrastructure means that more falls on the shoulder of companies to create the infrastructure it needs to operate. And lastly, a minority but persistent negative perception that also need to be managed. So I will leave you with this. I would like to thank the Mustardseed Trust and the Global Seaweed Coalition for funding this study. A big thank you to NBS and SOVAL teams for welcoming me and their availability for the numerous discussions we had. Many thanks to Sarah Telu for the translation and everybody who took part in the interviews and the group discussions. Thank you for your attention, and I'm here to answer any question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Virginie. I will directly leave the floor to Manon, so we have some time for the discussion then.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, first of all, to Mélanie, to the Global Seaweed Coalition, and to the Mustardseed Trust for making this happen, and to Virginie also for this presentation and the work. It's very valuable for us at NBS to have all this data because, to be honest, we tried to do some interviews, but because we are the company, the answers will be biased. So having this work is wonderful for us and will allow us to tackle some problems. So I will just add some comments on some points that we already tried to change, to improve. So Virginie was there on November, I think. So there is not a lot of time, so we didn't have a lot of improvement, but it will come. So first of all, about the incoming improve, we work with the seaweed farmers to tackle the problems of the seedling makers. In fact, they don't earn a lot every month. And the question we had with them is how to increase the wage and how can the association of AVA can help. So these we had good responses because for each line we pay, they will have a certain amount from now. So the seedling makers will have an improvement in their income. So that's a good step for us in the beginning. So for example, for a seedling maker that was doing like 250 per month, she can now maybe go, if she works a lot and fast, to 400 with the help of AVA. So that's a good step for us too. So that's the part of AVA, and at NBS we also try to improve the working comfort. Before they had to go and take their seaweeds that they will go and put them in the lines. So now we group everything is in the same place, so they don't have anymore to carry heavy bags, and I think it will have a good impact on their work also. So this is for the income improvement. About the women empowerment, A lot is already changing. It has, for me, already changed since I arrived 2 years ago at NBS. Because, for example, when I arrived, I was in the NBS team. The only woman going every day, apart from the seaweed farmers, working every day in the water. Now we have a lot of laborers that are women. It's not only a work for the men now to go in the water every day. So for me, it's a big step. Also, about the responsibilities, the more the company grow, the more we give responsibilities little by little to women. And I think in more years, we will have more women now with responsibilities. But we also plan to work on that, especially how the woman is perceived and how she can talk in the company. We are planning to work on, for example, sexual harassment at work, which is a topic that we never tackled since the beginning of the company. And for me, it's a bit touchy, especially in Madagascar. It's touchy in the world, but I think here it's touchier. So we will need help. We are working already to find the help we need. So it's something we are going to tackle, I think, this year already. So that's a topic coming soon. And the last topic we already made also a big change is the fact that with the changing of wages, with the seaweed farmers earning a lot, they don't have the education, the financial education. So we try to find someone who could help us to do some, I don't know if we can call it workshops or, yeah, we will do some work with at the beginning with farmers that are willing to do it, to on how to use their wages, how to invest on other things. If, for example, seaweed is not working during the low season, what can you do with this money? And yeah, so a lot of financial education. We already found the person. I think she's now with us here. And I am eager to work with her. We already have some steps the next week. So hopefully the seaweed farmers are going to join us on that, because that's something we cannot force them to do. It's an opportunity for them. So I think we will work on that also. And yes, I think that's it. There are a lot of things that we don't have all the cards in our hands. So because it's cultural, because it's economic in the country, so we are going to do as best as we can. But yeah, I think 2026 we are going to change a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Manon, for this beautiful insight and all the change that already happened in such a small amount of time. I hope it really encourage you to run similar study to improve seaweed farming model. And to answer one of the questions that was in the chat from Arnie, this is a model of community-based farming. So it's not like a company farm, but each farmer are having their own contract. It's just that Manon and his team are coordinating to support the seaweed farmers, so they have less responsibility and thinking ahead. There is a couple of questions in the chat, so I won't be long, but again, very much thank you, Virginie and Manon. So I will go to the first one from Harrison. Thank you for a great presentation. Could you expound a little on the demographic? To what extent do we have involvement of women and youth across the seaweed value chain? What is the trend in involvement of younger workers?
Can start, maybe Manon can complete. So women, as I said later in the presentation, are very much part of the value chain. They are not, compared to elsewhere in Madagascar, there are not as many seaweed farmers who are women than men. They're very much a minority. But on the seedling making, all of them are women. So yes, it's women are present, but the division of labor is highly segregated on gender lines. And many people are young in the value chain as well. At least at NBS, I don't know really the demographic in terms of age, but it looks like most people are quite young. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may complete, I think the average age in the workers is 28, 30 years. So everyone is quite young. Even among the seaweed farmers, the mean is 30 years. Because the population in Sainte-Marie is young, is quite young. So yeah. But we don't, we have a politic of 0 children, 0 underage people in the field. So even when a farmer or a worker wants to come with his children in the field, we don't accept that. It's something we are very strict with that. Sometimes it's hard for them because they can help us, they can help them also. So yeah, but we don't accept that.
Yes, thank you. And it's interesting to notice that actually, because we are familiar with the Tanzanian model where 80% of the women are farmers. So here we see that in Madagascar, the model is different. And Virginie, maybe in your next answer, you can mention that you also did some livelihood impact study in Tanzania, in fact. Okay, next question. How are the prospects for scaling up production in Sainte-Marie so more farmers can join? And the social tension in relation to inequality can potentially be lower. Yes.
Maybe Manon, you might be better suited to answer.
Yeah, I don't know if I understood well the question, but the prospect of for scaling up production is Sainte-Marie. At NBS, at least, I think we are at our top number of seaweed farmers, for example, because of the environmental pressure that Virginie mentioned. But there are also other companies that can also develop, like Sovalg and Madalg. And I think, for example, Sovalg will have subventions this year and will recruit other seaweed farmers, 10 at least. So say, yeah, the production will grow, but we have to be very careful about what we put in the lagoon and to what extent we have to stop. So yeah.
How do you select the seaweed farmers? What is the process to become a farmer in this community-led function?
Good question. So I don't know, I am answering everything. Maybe Virginie also wants to answer, but at the beginning, for example, for NBS, we did community consultation because the seaweed activity was new. Nobody knew about that. We had to inform them that we are going to do that in the community, the village. So little by little, the farmers, the people came and became farmers. At the beginning, you didn't have a lot of money. You had less than the minimum wage in Madagascar, so it was a sacrifice at the beginning. And the criteria was to be from the community, from Ankobaok at the beginning. There were several profiles. We needed women, we needed men, we needed young, we needed older people to have a different panel of people. And yeah, the more we grew, the more we took also farmers. And it was also the ropes that were limiting us. So if we had enough ropes we could take more seaweed farmers. If we didn't, we had to wait a bit from subventions or other things like that. So at the beginning, it was like this. And then people that were originally from the village that heard that there is this activity that is coming in their village came back to their village. So more and more people came. And that's how we got 120 farmers. It's a bit different from Sauvague, where the zone is it's I don't know how to say that, but you have 3 villages different in the marine zone that is allowed to Sauvague. So they are coming from different villages.
Okay. Thank you. We are already running out of time. It's already the hour, and I see a lot of people leaving. But I want to thank you all. I think we have a fantastic the report that can be shared, and I hope that we will be able to replicate in other regions. It has been done not exactly the same way in Tasmania, but differently in Latin America would be very interesting. So I won't be so long. Just if you want to be updated about the next webinar, don't hesitate to become a member of the Global Seaweed Coalition. It's free of charge, and you will know in advance when is the next webinar. And yeah, I don't know if Virginie and Manon, you want to say a last word, otherwise we're gonna close the session.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. And for all the question in the chat, we will take them and answer if we can.
Okay. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for
Great
joining
job.
today.
Thank you very much. Bye.